This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome back our returning celebrity guest, a 5-time club member. You know her from her previous appearances on Inglourious Basterds, Zodiac, My Fair Lady, The Artist, The Great Dictator, Forrest Gump, and recently Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Please welcome back Sarah Duncan.
Good to be back, guys.
We also welcome in our newest celebrity guest, a film reviewer from Liz in a Movie. Please welcome in Liz Arnold.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, welcome to both of you. But, Liz, you're a new guest to the show, and that means you are subject to our new guest questions, the dreaded new guest questions. But with all new guests to the show, we like to ask a few questions to allow the audience to get to know you. So, first up, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies.
Okay, well, I'm Liz, and I work a boring corporate job during the day. And then I fill all my free time with fun and random hobbies. One of those happens to be watching movies and sharing all of my opinions. I also love to research fun facts about movies, and that's a lot of my content on Liz in a Movie. So if you're interested in fun facts, check it out. And I used to have a podcast. There's a bunch of episodes still up on YouTube. It's also at Liz in a Movie.
Excellent. Number 2, usually the most difficult question for people, but what is your favorite movie and why?
Okay, so this one's actually really easy for me. My favorite movie ever is Legally Blonde. I could watch it a million times and never get tired of it. Elle Woods, in my opinion, is the perfect embodiment of female empowerment without the loss of femininity. And it's also incredibly quotable and hilarious. So,
well, I have seen that movie way too often, but I will say Law School does feel very familiar from that film. So, third question, what makes a good movie for you?
This is the hardest one for me because I like so many types of movies. Like, I'll pretty much watch anything and find something I like about it. But usually I go for like the good emotional storyline. Rom-coms are my absolute faves. I've always really liked super imaginative films as well. So like Lord of the Rings, animated movies like Shrek. I was into all of the like early 2000s series, like Hunger Games, Divergent, all that stuff. Wide range.
No, just one thing. You don't want to experience a small portion of the buffet that's out there.
Yep, I want it all.
Well, welcome to you. And with that, we will dive right into our episode for the evening. Tonight, for our 238th episode, we discuss the surprise hit mystery thriller Knives Out for its 5th anniversary. Written and directed by Rian Johnson. Music by Nathan Johnson. I don't know if they're any relation since Johnson is a fairly common surname, but possibly. Could be. Starring Daniel Craig as the famous Benoit Blanc. Chris Evans as Hugh Ransom Drysdale. Anna de Armas as Marta Cabrera. Jamie Lee Curtis as Linda Drysdale. Michael Shannon as Walt Thrombey, Don Johnson as Richard Drysdale, Toni Collette as Joni Thromby, Lakeith Stanfield as Detective Lieutenant Elliot, Catherine Langford as Meg Thromby, Jaden Martell as Jacob Thromby, Frank Oz as Alan Stevens, Ricky Lindholm as Donna Thromby, and Edie Patterson as Fran.
You forgot Christopher Plummer.
Oh, you're right, I did.
The guy the movie's about.
One of my favorite actors in this whole movie.
Well, yeah, I don't know. That you are correct. It is an oversight by me. And Christopher Plummer as Harlan Thrombey. Recognition for this movie? Knives Out was released on November 27th, 2019. The film was an unexpected hit, grossing roughly $312.9 million on a budget of $40 million. Knives Out also received overwhelming critical praise as it was considered one of the year's best films by the American Film Institute, National Board of Review, and the mainstream press in several ranked lists. Additionally, many accolades were showered upon Rian Johnson, Daniel Craig, and the ensemble cast. The film would go on to be nominated for Best Original Screenplay that year, losing out to... anyone? Parasite. Due to the lower budget and high gross with a potential for serialization, Netflix won a bidding war in 2021 for the rights to the next two sequels for $469 million. Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, was released in 2022, while the third film, Wake Up Dead Man, is set to be released next year in 2025. Knives Out currently holds a 97% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 82 score on Metacritic, and a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, as we start each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
Saw it in the movie theater with you and
Yes,
Mom,
you did.
and I think the whole family went out to see it.
It could be. It was a Thanksgiving release. It came out on your birthday, and I remember wanting to see it, so you and I were going to go, and I think everybody just joined in. And then I think we also got Linda and Steve to go with us.
Yeah, I wanted to see it because, I don't know, it was my birthday, and usually don't do all that much on my birthday, so I wanted to go to a movie.
Fair enough.
And I like mysteries.
Exactly.
And this was funny on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, believe it or not, it was the most normal role I've ever seen Michael Shannon do.
No. When he's in Groundhog Day for that small cameo.
That's true.
WrestleMania tickets!
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you think you were at the theater with us?
Yeah. I remember watching this with you guys. Because I remember being in the car afterwards and you reserving your right to not tell us your opinion of the movie.
Well, that's because it was at a phase where every time I said whether I liked or disliked a movie, Dad would get mad at me for not agreeing with his opinion. So on the off chance that I was not going to yes.
No, it was not
Yes.
because you disagreed with my opinion. It's
It
because
so
you were
was.
you were trying to be Gene Siskel about every aspect of the film. And I'm
I'm
like,
sorry, that's how I enjoyed films.
okay,
I mean, that's what we do on this show anymore, isn't it?
yes, but there's, like I said, when I'm grading a movie, I do 1 to 5 on the quality, and I do 1 to 5 on the enjoyment.
Okay, whatever.
There are a lot of schlocky movies that I really enjoy because they're fun.
Like, what was the Pop-Tarts movie?
Yes,
Unfrosted.
I gave Pop-Tarts on a fun scale of 4. On a quality of film, a 0.5.
I still have yet to see that, but it's on my list.
I haven't either. I've got to add it to my list now.
It's worth it.
It's
worth
trash.
It's worth watching just to see Hugh Grant in that tiger suit.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, they made him Thul Ravenscroft, who was Tony the Tiger, and so
You're not selling the movie all
Yes.
that well right now. All I'll say is anybody who at this point still feels like they need to see it is what I have currently deemed a cinemasochist.
Oh, I love that.
Anyway, as the resident non-Duncan on this episode, Liz, what is your relationship to this? You didn't see it in the theater with us too, did you?
No, I don't think so. I was actually like a late bloomer to this film. I didn't watch it until last year. Last summer was the first time I saw it. And after watching it, I was like, man, like, why did I wait so long on that? It was really good. Just fun. Like Dana was saying, it's hilarious. But I've seen it multiple times since then, so.
I'll be honest. This to me feels like Knives Out is to the mystery genre what Scream was to the horror genre of the mid-90s. You're taking something that for most people just kind of felt dead in a retread that it was just filled with so many tropes and things that would come out of the woodwork. And this injected a lot of fun, mayhem. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it wasn't trying to do it in a way that was bringing down the genre, but rather trying to reinforce what it liked about it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels fresh. I'll be honest also that I actually prefer Glass Onion to the original.
Really?
Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but I think Daniel Craig has a lot more to do in the second one, and I preferred his character coming out a little bit more, whereas this one, he's kind of more in the background. But I also enjoyed Ed Norton kind of being a dink the entire movie, and then having the reveal be that he's a dink.
What? Ed Norton, a dink?
Yeah.
He plays all dinks in the movie so well. I don't understand that.
Well, maybe it wasn't acting.
That's what I hear.
But I guess what else do you think the movie is about?
Entitlement, family dynamics.
I actually am going to do a random poll here from the movie. Do you remember where they talk about gravity's rainbow?
Yes.
I actually bothered to look that up. And I think it has something to say about what the actual movie is about. And the book deals entirely with power struggles and corruption, which I feel like has a lot to do with this family. They're constantly undermining each other, second-guessing and manipulating it along the way, struggling to be the top of this. So I think it's a thing of what this is all about. So
I'm very curious to see what the third one's going to be about, because the first one goes after those of like old money, the ones who are like the Victorian homes and the Gothic aesthetic, but they're these big families that have large sums of money. They all do different things, but it was all started by one person essentially, and he becomes the godfather of everything else that's going on in the family, and they're all set to wait until he dies and then inherit everything. Whereas the second movie is poking fun at like the tech billionaires and all these like estranged new wealth people. So what do you do for the third one? If it's truly these movies are just about like class warfare and poking fun at the uber rich, where do you go?
Politicians.
I mean, they do enough of that in this movie, to be fair. Other thoughts?
The first thing that came to mind for me was trusting your gut. Because I feel like from the beginning, you have a pretty good idea of the nature of each person. And also, Detective Benoit Blanc kind of says that he knew all along who it was and who was innocent and being framed. And he just like wasn't ready to speak it out loud.
Apparently we have a secondary guest on the show.
Oh, yes. This is one of my kitty cats. Her name is Hermione.
Ah.
She will make an appearance. If there's talking being happening, she'll be here.
Well, welcome, Hermione. Yeah, I think there is a literal portion to listening to your gut in this. Thus the regurgitation that often happens.
That's funny.
Well, the only one that was genuine in the entire group is the one who ended up with everything.
So, as I've alluded to already, I kind of thought that for a lot of the mystery genre, even though you and I, Dad, have gone out to see like the new Poirot mysteries done by Kenneth Branagh, I think this is, for the most part, a genre that, for the mass public, doesn't carry as much water as it probably used to. I don't see a lot of people, unless they're in a certain age category, closer to your age than mine, Dad, probably going to a lot of these. Yet, this movie, I think by my projections, and I'm doing some very quick math in my head here, basically made close to 8 times its original budget. So what exactly about this movie caught on? Is it a matter of where the culture was at in 2019 and maybe since? Or is it more, this was just a really good movie? I guess, what would you put your finger on?
I was listening to a piece the other day when they were discussing Conclave and how well it's doing so far. And that there is a market for something that's smart, not overly complicated, and not politically motivated. It doesn't have a real major story to tell or a point to it that people who are in their 20s to 70s won't mind going and seeing, because there's nothing that offends anybody's sensibilities. It doesn't insult your intelligence. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Kenneth Branagh started doing Poirot, is because this film did so well, and there is a connection for people wanting to see something like this. Not to mention the fact that it's secondary market, because you're going to sell to a lot of middle-aged people in this country simply through streaming if they miss it going around at the theaters.
To be fair, he started doing Poirot and released a movie 2 years before this ever came out.
Okay. Well, I think he was then ahead of the curve.
But even so, I do think that there is something in the culture that we do love puzzle box TV shows. So maybe it has something to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
We just hadn't really captured it on film recently.
Mysteries have long been one of the best-selling genres of books, more so than almost any other category. But there's not a lot of really good mystery films. One of the last ones that I can truly point to is Clue.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the 80s.
There's got to be at least a few decent, like, mystery ones. I mean, if it's a matter of there being some type of reveal at the end, The Sixth Sense, Fight
They're
Club,
not true mysteries.
The Usual Suspects.
Okay,
Yeah.
that I'll give you. But that's what I'm saying. It's one of the best-selling genres. But it's hard to write for the screen to an extent, I think. And if you look back at this film, some of the ways they foreshadowed and brought up tidbits and misdirected multiple times, that you have to watch multiple times in order to catch all of them, are kind of brilliant, because they kept throwing the finger in every direction. And you can do that so much better in a book than you can when you actually legitimately have people watching every move.
I would claim that Ocean's 11 is a mystery, because they ultimately are unraveling how they're going to pull off the caper, and they give you little clues throughout, and the reveal shows you how they actually did it.
I think a lot of early Christopher Nolan films might be in the same vein, like Memento and Prestige kind of have a mystery angle to them. I wouldn't call them like straight.
Especially.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them straight mysteries, but there's definitely like a puzzle box nature to them.
I wonder if this movie specifically was more successful than some of the mystery genre type films that came out like in the 90s and the early 2000s, because it wasn't like a children's movie. Because I feel like when you think of like the investigator type films, you think of like Nancy Drew, Kit Kittredge, those type, which are really, they're kids movies. And this one is PG-13, so it does cater to a younger audience, but it's also made for adults. It's got that witty humor, and there's a little bit of violence in there. So I wonder if that's why this one had such an overwhelming success. And also, I mean, the cast was very alluring. I feel like a lot of people watched this because all their favorite actors and actresses were in the movie.
I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis and Don Johnson were huge in the 80s, and that's drawing into my age group.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to get people of my age back into the theaters.
They really put a lot into this film, too, as far as the quality of the film itself. They put a lot of money into it. While a $40 million budget feels small in comparison to some of the movies that we see today, it's a quite hefty budget for a mystery film, just because it is so hit or miss whether it's going to gain traction or not. But they put the money into it, and I think it really paid off. They did a great job.
Well, given that he's writing these all himself, and the sets and the production value, it has to be pretty low. It's for the most part going to be just casting people. And outside of maybe Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, and Wes Anderson, Rian Johnson probably has the best collection of just random stars wanting to be a part of this. I mean, Glass Onion had at least like 5-6 different major people. And the next one, just from the cast list alone, Andrew Scott, Jeremy Renner, Thomas Hayden Church, Mila Kunis, Josh O'Connor, Josh Brolin, Kerry Washington, and Glenn Close. Like, it was a barrage when they started releasing all the casting. It was like every day we'd get like 2 major stars showing up in this movie. And I'm sure there's going to be some random cameo somewhere for random people that are connected with Rian Johnson. We already know for sure that JGL is going to show up in some capacity in this movie, as he has in the last 2, but it's been like a really subtle Easter egg.
Apparently, Ana de Armas is supposed to be back too at some point. Not as like a major role, but she is supposed to make a cameo in the film.
Well, that'll be interesting. I'm not opposed to it. But either way, for his post-Bond career, this might be the best post-Bond career anybody's had outside of maybe Sean Connery winning an Oscar. So, if we are ready to move on, Dad, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Rian Johnson's Knives Out is a gleeful whodunit that reinvents the genre while paying homage to its classical roots. Set against the backdrop of a sprawling Gothic mansion, the film begins with the suspicious death of Harlan Thrombey, a wealthy mystery writer, after a family gathering. Enter Benoit Blanc, Daniel Craig, a gentleman detective with a syrupy southern drawl and an eye for deceit. What unfolds is a deliciously twisty investigation into Harlan's eccentric and entitled family, each of whom has motives aplenty. Blanc's razor-sharp intuition and eccentric charm lead him through the maze of alibis and half-truths, spun by quarrelsome Thrombeys. At the heart of the mystery is Marta Cabrera, Harlan's devoted nurse, whose genuine care for her employer is her saving grace, or perhaps her undoing. As the layers of this intricate puzzle peel away, Marta's role becomes pivotal, bringing to light the dark undercurrents of greed and betrayal lurking beneath the family's polished veneer.
Thank you. Did you know? It was Don Johnson's idea for his character to hand his empty plate to Marta as if she were the maid during the immigration conversation. Did you know? At the will reading, Ransom tells his family to eat shit. He was originally scripted to tell them, fuck you, but Rian Johnson decided to remove most of the F-bombs in the script to secure a PG-13 rating and to keep the movie much more like mystery films he used to watch when he was growing up. Chris Evans was the one who suggested substituting eat shit. Did you know? Several characters refer to a fictional Hallmark movie starring Danica McKellar titled Deadly by Surprise. Though McKellar was not asked if her name could be used, she was delighted that it was included, and she shared her love for this movie on Instagram. She later sent Rian Johnson a knife with the words Deadly by Surprise engraved on it. Did you know? Both the title Knives Out and the working title Morning Bell are tracks from the album Amnesiac from 2001 by the English rock band Radiohead. Shout out to one Mr. Andrew Corns, who apparently that's like his second favorite band, I guess. Did you know? The coin Benoit Blanc flips is a 1901 U.S. Morgan silver dollar. Since they were made of 90% silver, the government melted millions during World War I to help fund the war effort. Some are very hard to find, and depending on condition, they can fetch thousands of dollars. And with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 239th episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, and new guest, Clarissa of I've Seen That One, to revisit Roman Holiday from 1953. Directed by William Wyler, written by Dalton Trumbo, Ian McClellan Hunter, and John Dighton. Music by Georges Auric and Victor Young, starring Gregory Peck, Audrey Hepburn, and Eddie Albert. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. All right, before we move too much farther, Sarah, I know that you don't have your own show or podcast or major Instagram page or whatever else, but is there anything that you're working on or where people can find you that you'd like to promote quickly?
They can always find me online. I'm still posting pictures from my recent trip. Follow at the Nomadic Archaeologist.
On which site?
Instagram.
Thank you.
Sorry.
But our guest with much more to potentially promote, Liz, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I am working on a few early screenings that I got to go to. I have Gladiator 2 and then seeing Wicked early this week. So I'll have both of those up very soon.
Okay. Well, I think you, by your reaction there, are a little stronger on one than the other, but maybe that's just me reading into it. I will be honest, I will probably see Wicked because it's going to be nominated for something. But I know almost nothing about it. I know like none of the songs, so I will be completely clean for this whole thing.
That is the best way to go in, honestly. I am reading the book right now, but I've seen the musical multiple times and I'm obsessed, but you have to go in not knowing anything. Like, don't look it up, don't watch the trailers, just go in and enjoy it. It's absolutely fabulous. Even if you're not into musicals, like, it's going to be amazing.
And I am, but there's that. All right. Excellent. And as always, our guest links will be available both on the website as well as in the show notes. So it is time for everyone's favorite weekly segment. That's right. It's Ask Dana Anything. We do have one guest submission today. Frequent guest Kieran B., host of the Best Picture Cast, would like to know, Dana, would you consider doing a live watch-along of Megalopolis?
Yes, I would, if I get to actually comment. I have a feeling it would be like Mystery Science Fiction Theater 3000, because I am going to just probably roast the hell out of it.
Okay, so first off, do you not know what a watch-along is?
Well, yeah.
Okay, we set up a camera view of you, live stream it, and you get to react in real time as you're watching the movie.
I understand.
And people watch for your reactions.
It won't be just my reactions. It'll be my comments as well.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now they're going to be looking for dates, but we'll have to discuss the logistics of this for you.
That's fine.
All right.
I just have to find what 3.5, 4 hours of my life that I don't need back. The amount of available time is getting shorter every year.
No.
So
that's up to you. You could have very easily said no.
Yeah, no, I'll do it because it sounds like fun. Because I really, I just find the chutzpah of producing a behemoth film and blowing all of your money on it just because it's what you want to do when no one wants to watch it, to be just the ultimate, I don't know how you'd want to say it, send off,
legacy power play.
Yeah, for 80-year-old Hall of Fame director.
Okay, Sarah, you said you had a question for Dad.
I do. I'm going to ask about Grandma, because I don't know a lot about what she was like other than you teasing her as you got older. So what's your favorite memory with Grandma from growing up?
Okay, my favorite memory
with your mom.
Of my mom?
Your mother.
Oh, criminy.
I don't think you've told the potato ivy story on here.
Probably not. Okay, my mother was... I loved my mom, but she was not in the first line when they were handing out IQ points. Okay? She barely graduated high school. She had a D average.
That's hard to do.
I know, but she managed. And in fact, she told me about how her and her girlfriend, Darlene, and her used to share or copy off each other's papers and tests. And I'm like, and Darlene was good at English. And I looked at my mom's grades and it was C-. I said, Mom, if you're going to copy off somebody, at least get somebody smart. Well, that's who was sharing her things with me. Okay, so needless to say, my mother got really into houseplants. And we were in my church, and the Sunday school had taken a potato, and they had put 3 toothpicks in it and stuck the end of the potato into a coffee can full of water. And obviously it sprouted all the plants, and it was so that the kids could see what a potato plant looked like and how it grew the potato underneath. Well, my mother came out and she looked at this and she goes, oh, what a beautiful ivy plant. I wonder where they found it. I said, well, Mom, it's rare. It's a Peruvian potato ivy. And so she said, oh, I've got to find one. So I'm riding with her. I'm about 9, 10 years old. And she's driving all over the place to every greenhouse looking for a Peruvian potato ivy. This went on for about 3 months until I just could not stand it any longer and finally said that I made the whole thing up. And she said, ooh, I'm going to short sheet your bed and I'll get you. And then, it didn't dawn on me for a while, but after a couple of years of her saying this every time I tricked her into something, I said, do you even know what short sheeting your bed means? And she goes, no, but I'll find out.
See, I've never heard that element of the story. I've heard the short sheeting. Never heard the addendum.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, another classic story is that your mother and I are getting married. And so we're having a wedding shower. And so we're walking out of Kmart.
Oh, yes.
And Mom's got a bag. And she turns to Chris and says, you've had other wedding showers, haven't you? Yes, Mom, I have had a couple. Oh. Did you get a pizza pan? No. I have something for your next shower. And I turned and said, Mom, is it a pizza pan? Oh, you always figure this stuff out. So that was my mother. Not to mention the fact that I could go on for quite a while about her cooking. I used to love.
You did like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I used to love food service. Ugh. Yeah.
I can't remember what context it was, but I'm pretty sure an ADA came up about like your meal choices in high school because she was such a terrible cook.
Oh yeah. I mean, pizza, burgers, mystery loaf, anything was better. I mean,
really, mystery loaf?
Oh yeah. Yeah. At least it had substance. Her meatloaf was like eating Alpo. My dad almost backhanded me, but yeah. So
you would have backhanded me had I done that to my mom.
Well, probably, but yes, your mother made a lot better food than my mother did. So,
well,
anyway.
I mean, a low bar, but to be fair, my mother is a very good cook.
Yes,
and
I
baker.
Appreciate that you guys said that.
She'll never know. She doesn't listen to the show. She only knows the episodes that she's on, and then she forgets them immediately.
Kind of like every movie she's watched with Dad.
I know. Well, I've never seen that movie. Yes, we saw it together.
But the most classic one that I think I've ever had is not the one that she forgot. It's the ones that she says she's seen that she hasn't, and she clearly has not. Such as, we were in the car, and I said something about Call Me By Your Name. And she said, I've seen that movie. No, you haven't, Mom. Yes, I did. We watched it, whatever time. I said, all right, Mom, what's the peach scene about? Yeah, well, needless to say, she had no idea. Which is probably a good thing. Let's move on. All right. Getting back into our movie of the evening. Best performance was where we left off. Dad, who did you have down?
I had Rian Johnson.
As
just by the writing and the directing, the visual, the casting, I think he had a huge play on. I think all aspects of this, this was his project. This was his baby, and he did a very fine job overall.
Given that he's the writer-director and controls so much of the operation, this is really his idea. We have often defaulted into any of the categories where the writer-director and it's like their personal project, but I don't see any reason to deviate here. I also have Rian Johnson.
For best performance, I had Ana de Armas. I think she beautifully pulls off all of the both funny and serious moments of this. She plays a very believable character, and she's just fun to watch.
Liz, who did you have?
I picked two. I also said Ana de Armas. I felt like she was very believable, just as like a normal girl. Like she probably reacted in a lot of these situations how I would have reacted, which is hard to pull off. But I also said Daniel Craig. I thought he was fabulous. The accent, the clothes, the mannerisms, everything was just spot on. And then I did give an honorable mention to Ransom's sweater because I got quite a bit of attention on the internet after this movie came out.
Best secondary performance, I had Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't know if she was necessarily acting. I know that she's supposedly a very nice person, but she has the ability to apparently pull this club out of the bag quite often, which is the like really devilish, shrill woman, and she does it very capably. In fact, I would argue she won her Oscar for doing a very similar role, just with Kung Fu.
I actually had Hugh Ransom, played by
Chris Evans.
Chris Evans, thank you. Why that was baffling me for a second there. I just had it. Is beyond me for best secondary. I thought he was fun and believable, but he very much captures this guy that you have to love to hate because he takes you with him in every different direction very well.
The only thing that was not said about Chris Evans's character of Ransom in this movie is that he played college lacrosse.
Yeah. Hell, I had a whole bunch of guys I went to college with that were that. Ugh.
Liz, your best secondary?
I actually gave this one to Christopher Plummer. I thought he was fantastic. He was a hero. I don't know what to call him, but every scene he was in, he added. He never detracted from the film. And I will say too, like the more characters they introduced throughout the movie, the better the cast got. I think they were all just amazing, but I loved Christopher Plummer in this role.
Agreed.
Well, if the ensemble cast was a 10, Ana de Armas was an 11. She went, you could turn her up to 11 in this film to go with Jamie Lee Curtis's husband.
Wow, did you take a far walk on that one?
Not that far. That film's supposedly coming out this summer or next summer, I guess, yet.
The sequel, yes.
This
There's
is Spinal Tap
a follow-up or a remake of Spinal Tap?
Yes.
A follow-up.
Yep.
Okay.
So no, to me, she, the ensemble cast was great. She's just better. I mean, this is her film. She stole the film, and I haven't seen anything, to me anyway. To be honest, part of me wondered if she ended up with the part in the last Bond film.
Yes.
If it was because Daniel
Yes.
Craig recommended her.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
I found a note. I didn't include it in the Did You Know section, but yes, he specifically liked working with her, so he suggested her for the role. That's how she was in the last Bond film.
Yeah. And she was badass in that film.
Yes, she was. is probably one of the only redeeming parts of that entire movie.
Yeah.
And we say that as diehard Bond fans. So, but I agree on the Christopher Plummer angle. I have him as my most charismatic. I think that he is larger in just personality and booming with charisma every time he's on screen. And so it actually makes that level of personality makes it so that when he is gone, you feel the impact that much harder. So I think his just sheer presence in that role, there are not too many other actors you probably could have gotten with that level of gravitas to make you pay attention when they're gone and feel the death that much harder. So I think it's a brilliant form of casting. And frankly, if it's the last thing people remember about Christopher Plummer, there are much worse movies to go out on. Like, I don't know, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or Welcome to Mooseport, which apparently my dad likes.
It was funny. It was stupid, but it was funny. Ray Romano and Gene Hackman together, it was like,
oh,
it was so stupid that it was funny.
Okay, sure.
It's like it was the equivalent of dogs playing poker,
which apparently only you like.
I think it's hilarious.
Okay, well, you are certainly a character, Dad. Who is your most charismatic?
I had Chris Evans, simply because what a dick. The only thing that was missing was the lacrosse polo shirts and the sweaters and the tying around the neck and the boat shoes. He could have been the kids I went to college with who all had their dad's credit cards and flaunted their money and were douchebags.
Yep.
So I gave it to him simply because his performance was spot on. The word entitlement should be tattooed on their forehead.
I also said Chris Evans. He was so believable as this character. And it's kind of crazy. I feel like we didn't expect a ton from him because everything we've seen him in so far is like the superhero movies where he's not doing a ton other than like, I don't know, being there. So it was pretty surprising for me that he was so good in this role. And like, I wanted to like him. I wanted to like this ransom fellow. And it's too bad we couldn't trust him.
You must be younger than me because I do remember one of his very few film performances outside of the superhero genre in Not Another Teen Movie, where he's basically a Freddie Prinze Jr. ripoff.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Oh,
He is awful. And that movie is
it's
awful.
so bad.
But
so bad.
I mean, it lost me when the guy died from concussions on the sideline.
Oh, no.
It's such a weird movie. It's a
Yes.
amalgamation of like all the weird teen dramas of like the last 10 years at the time.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, Sarah.
I had Christopher Plummer for this. Much like you, I just thought he brought so much fun to every scene he was in, whether it's, teasing as he's going up the stairs or just even when he's threatening people, you just look at his face and he fills the screen. He's one of those old actors that just is the epitome of what you think he was. And I've loved everything I've ever seen him in, pretty much. I haven't seen a lot of the bad ones, so don't take that with a grain of salt. But he's just a wonderful actor, and I think he embodies this kind old man, even if he is a little bit, everybody has their lies, as Benny says in the movie, and he does point out one that supposedly Harlan does tell, but even so, he's just so charming.
You remember seeing him live?
Yes, I do.
He and Brian Dennehy doing Inherit the Wind on Broadway. So,
and yet another Broadway story by Dana.
Get out the punch card?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Let's move to best scene. I have 5 nominees here, but we can add in more if anyone would like. I have the second interview montage at the opening, which we've kind of already alluded to with the one note on the piano. We have Marta's story, which is kind of the flashback of telling from her perspective what she thought happened. We have the will reading, Ransom's offer, which is in the restaurant when he makes her eat the bowl of beans. And then the final reveal. So roughly the last 15 or so minutes of the film. Now, is there anything that anyone else would like to add or thought I missed? Hearing none. All right, out of these, what is the best scene?
I think the final reveal. I think it makes the whole movie, the final reveal. They build up and build up and build up, and you kind of know what's going on by the time it happens, but there's a couple little twists and turns in there that are just fun, and you have some aha moments as well.
I do think it's very clever in how he solves the mystery without it actually being like somebody actually did it. I mean, they did, but they didn't. And so because it has a little bit more intelligence to it, I think it actually makes the solution more clever. It's something you didn't necessarily expect.
I actually picked that first scene, the note on the piano, because it's a way of introducing him, but the more I stop and actually went back to each time he played a
him,
scene,
you're referring to Blanc?
Yes, my apologies. It actually points to some very interesting things, and it leads. It's an interesting way to lead into Benny's character, but also it points out, in my opinion, some of the misconceptions and lies that they're telling, which is kind of how you start building this whole narrative.
Yeah, it was a really clever way to introduce all the characters as well.
And for that matter, a lot of exposition in a very short window of time. You meet most of the characters, you get most of their background perspectives and how the other family members feel about them within that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a very large exposition dump.
For me, it's the final reveal because Blanc has the opportunity to actually, shine and kind of go through his thought process. And it was implied repeatedly in the donut within a donut hole with a donut in the middle of that donut hole, or however it was phrased.
Okay, Foghorn.
Yeah. I see. Anyway.
I think you'd find it hard to sit on me, but...
CSI KFC.
No, but the cartoon Foghorn Leghorn steals from a character off of Fred Allen's radio show in the 30s.
And this has been Uninteresting Facts with Dana. All right, moving on. I'm going to take the will reading because there is nothing funnier to me than watching Captain America tell everyone to eat shit. It's also, frankly, the pivot point in the movie when she inherits everything and you're just like, oh, that feels expected, but it's not really expected. And now the knives are truly out. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the hinge moment for the film where we start to get the revolving or the descending action down the hill.
Yeah, the fake nice goes away.
Exactly. We were so nice to you. We're going to take care of you. And then, well,
just kidding.
You anchor baby.
Yeah. Goodness.
Yeah.
They were so nice to her, and yet no one could remember what country she was from.
I think they named every country in South America except for Suriname.
Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil.
Argentina.
I don't think anybody named Argentina for that matter.
I don't think they did Chile. But
they also didn't do Guyana. That's
true.
Because nobody remembers it's there.
Yeah. Anyway.
And to be fair, Ana de Armas is Cuban, but that's besides. The will reading is also my favorite scene. And it's not just for the one moment, but it is also for the extension of the family dynamics with all of them basically infighting and everything else. It reminds me of certain moments with my own family.
I thought about what would be the practicality of just having them read a fake will where it just screws with everybody and they go, "You're kidding." Yeah, we are. That was his instructions. I will do the real will.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be something you'd do.
Yeah, I know. That was what my thought was. Then I saw this and I thought, nah, that'll ruin it now. So I can't do that. But I will say that this was great because as a lawyer, I've never heard of anybody actually reading a will. But it would be so much fun to sit there and watch families just come up completely unglued. I mean, it's bad enough that I've seen it happen in my own family with inheritances and such.
This is a public show.
Yeah, I know. Well, none of them listen, and if they do, I don't care.
Fair enough. All right, other favorite scenes.
I really liked the whole montage of Marta like foiling all the police evidence. She like ruins the tape. She covers up the footprints. She throws the trellis piece, and it's just like all very cute. It makes her look very guilty, but at the same time, you're like she's not guilty. So it was a fun moment for the movie.
I love that intimate moment between Marta and Harlan up in his study where they're just playing Go and he's talking about calling AARP for elder abuse on her.
Yes.
I just think it's intimate, it's funny, it establishes this heart between the two characters that keeps being repeated, but it's one of the first moments we truly get to see them actually like care about each other and have fun together. And I think that's really important.
All right, most indelible moment. Honestly, thinking back on this every time, I have to remind myself of just about everything else in the movie other than Chris Evans did it. That's literally the biggest thing that I remember every time going from place to place is Chris Evans did it. I don't remember how he did it exactly, but I remember he was the guilty party.
I have the final reveal as my most indelible moment simply because same thing. That's the part where how he basically just sunk himself.
I've got to agree. The final scene is easily the most indelible, but there's a caveat to that because I love this one line that kind of points back to it, or points to what's going to happen, where they're up in the study and he's talking about Ransom, having just had this big blowout with him earlier in the night. By him, I mean Harlan. And he's talking about not being able to tell the difference between a stage prop and a real knife.
For whatever reason, I always remember the scenes where Marta and Ransom are driving around together. And it's kind of like Starsky and Hutch, like on the run. It's just silly and fun. It's like a moment of brevity through the film, which I like.
The worst car chase ever?
Yeah, the worst car chase ever.
So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 215 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Also, you can follow each individual episode on our website as well. That has the notes for each individual episode with all of our scores, category nominations, and the individual factoids for each episode of the show. Just click the link in the episode description of this episode or go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast to find that. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes, John Peasley, 73, American television writer and producer, did Coach, According to Jim, and Live. and Maddie.
I have to be honest, I don't think I've seen any of these shows.
A coach I used to watch periodically.
Craig T. Nelson?
Craig T. Nelson and Jerry Van Dyke.
Okay.
Dick Van Dyke's younger brother.
And so we remember him here fondly with a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you. Let's move to best funniest lines. Benoit Blanc. What were the overheard words by the Nazi child masturbating in the bathroom? Wow, nothing. Not even a sympathy chuckle.
We were stunned. I'll let you figure out whether it was stunned in admiration or not.
All right, who's up?
One of my favorite humorous ones was in the political argument, their response was, so you'd say that even if the Swiss were clogging in the streets?
Benoit Blanc. Spoke in the car about the hole in the center of the donut. And yes, what you and Harlan did that fateful night seems at first glance to fill that hole perfectly. A donut hole in the donut's hole. But we must look a little closer. And when we do, we see that donut hole has a hole in its center. It's not a donut hole at all, but a smaller donut with its own hole. And our donut is not whole at all.
That was very well done.
Up until the end where you just lost it.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to maintain, but okay.
Fair enough.
This one is Great Nan Winetta. And she says, Ransom, are you back again already?
Benoit Blanc. But the complexity and the gray lie not in the truth, but what you do with the truth once you have it.
Be it cruel or comforting, the machine unerringly arrives at the truth. That's what it does, always.
Marta, I've never been to a will reading before. Blanc. Well, think it'd be like a game show, but think of a community theater production of a tax return.
Linda. I was just thinking about Dad's games. This all feels like one, like something he might write or do. I keep waiting for the big reveal, when it all makes sense.
Ransom. You think I'm not going to fight to protect my own, our birthright, our ancestral home? Oh, that is hooey. Harlan, he bought this place in the 80s from a Pakistani real estate millionaire. Oh, shut up with that Kentucky Fried Foghorn Leghorn drawl.
I've got Benny. Why is grief the providence of youth? I don't know, but I'd imagine that age deepens all feelings, including grief.
Blanc. Mr. Drysdale. Ransom. CSI KFC?
Jacob. And then I heard Ransom say, I'm warning you.
Joni Thromby. I read a tweet about a New Yorker article about you.
I honestly can't remember the name of the Nazi boy, but were you sleeping with my grandpa? You dirty acre baby.
And now he's working for the White House.
Yeah.
Do you have any left, Dad?
I'm out.
Okay. Liz, any left?
No.
I've got a couple. Benoit Blanc. Best judge of character is a dog. I've found that to be. Sarah, do you have any left?
I have one from Harlan. There is so much of me in that kid. Confident, stupid, I don't know, protected, playing life like a game without consequences until you can't tell the difference between a stage prop and a real knife.
Harlan Thrombey. Why do men instinctively pull at loose threads on their parachutes? All right. Let's move to the Stanley Rubric then. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film at least 5 years after the film's release. So as of basically right now and carrying forward, what is the legacy of this movie? We split this category between 2 sets of 5, one set of 5 for the industry and the other set for the general public. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I will go first.
All right.
I still think it's considered highly among critics as time has gone by, but biggest problem I have in the industry is it hasn't started a floodgate of whodunits. The only person I think whose career advanced from this was Ana de Armas, although Jamie Lee Curtis has kind of had a resurgence in a few other roles, but I don't know if she was really this was what propelled her or not. I went with a 3.5 for the industry simply because it made so much money and the fact that there was such a bidding war and it continues to go up. For the public, I had it about right, and then we did our informal poll at the office, and it was about half had ever seen the film.
It wasn't that high.
Wasn't even that high.
I think it's 20%.
Yeah, so I went with a 2.5 for the public, simply because I think there was a large group of people that have seen it off and on through those 5 years and have continued on to see the films or the next one and The Glass Onion, and then I think we'll be looking forward to the next one. So I have a 6 overall.
I will say that I think this is harder to gauge as of this morning doing the poll within the office than it was before that, because as much as maybe my perception being around the industry and around film people on Twitter is that most people have seen this, apparently that's just not true. It was the 29th finisher in the year that it came out, and while that's relatively good and possibly one of the largest box office returns ever for a film year in 2019, probably the last real great theater going year, I guess maybe from a cultural standpoint, I'm not sure that it's on the level I would have thought it to be, given how much money Netflix forked out to get the rights to these, and that it was somewhat of a underground hit. I think for all the film people, this is probably higher, but if you're talking about the casual people, I think it's maybe hit or miss. I'd be very tempted to say that there are not too many film people that have probably not seen this, so I still give it somewhat high marks, but I will take off a little bit for where the general public or the normies have not yet seen it. So I have that sitting at about a 3.5. And then on the industry side of it, Netflix made a very large venture to try and buy these, to the point that it resurrected Rian Johnson as a serious movie director after to what many perceive to be the debacle of The Last Jedi. Given how it has divided the fan base of Star Wars, it was going to be easy for most people to write off Rian Johnson after that movie. And for this to be his grand comeback and to get so much money, it definitely serves a Hollywood lesson on top of that. I think Daniel Craig is making like $50 million per movie, per sequel to each of these. So he's now like one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood as well. And we have people like probably climbing over themselves to get into one of these movies because they probably look very fun. So I actually have a 4 on that side. I have a 7.5 because I think most film people would say, as I have also said, make as many of these Rian Johnson as you want to. I will take one every 2 to 3 years for as long as you are willing to make them.
So I'll go. I would say from on the industry side, I would go with a 4 because it did kind of start this revival of the mystery genre, and like it is a well-made movie. So for the casual viewer or the general public, I would also give it a 4. I think people really enjoy this movie. Everyone I've talked to really enjoys it, and I think the sequel is just as good, and the new one coming out, I'm sure, is going to get just as much attention. So I guess an 8 overall.
For industry, this was a big name movie. This is one of the few things that we saw Chris Evans do outside of Marvel, especially as that chapter and his career was coming to a close. A lot of people my age grew up kind of with Jamie Lee Curtis, so that was kind of fun to see too. And I do agree with you that he has come back a little bit.
Grew up with Freaky Friday.
And Cheaper by the Dozen.
And numerous rom-coms as the mom figure for girls my age.
Okay, I'm apparently missing a fairly big chapter of her career, but okay, fair.
So I think this movie is a lot of fun. I know that this did start a large chapter. This was Daniel Craig's first big movie outside of that. So I gave it a 4 for industry, and then as far as popular, this to me is a movie that I can bring up, and I will still have people who know it. It's a great reference point. It's fun, and it is a constant recommendation if they haven't seen it to see it. You know, we're constantly getting more people to watch it by the movies coming out. So I would say I gave that 4 as well. So gave it an 8.
So that is a 7.38 average between the 4 of us. Let's move to impact and significance. Now, much like legacy, this is a measure of the impact and significance among the same two groups, the industry and the audience. But however, it is the initial 5 years with which it came out. So what impact did this make both in the industry and to the general audience in the initial 5 years? So basically from when it came out to right now, what is the impact and significance? And since Dad, you led off the last category, I will go here. I think given the nature of which it was a very large, publicized at least among the film fans and people on Twitter and all this other stuff, of the hoopla surrounding the Netflix purchase, and the fact that even though we don't necessarily know all the true numbers of Glass Onion, from every indication is that the sequel was just as big a hit, and maybe even more so because Netflix released it over Christmas, and it was one of the few good movies that Netflix has ever released. So take that with a grain of salt, but whatever. I have on the industry side of this, given that it basically resurrected Rian Johnson, created kind of a new franchise, made Daniel Craig much bigger of a star, even though he was James Bond, that's still somewhat of a niche franchise. And while this is also a niche franchise, he was able to move on in a way that like Pierce Brosnan and Timothy Dalton never were. So, and then on a audience perspective, I still think that these have wide enough appeal and people have come to them that maybe there is something out there. I have the exact same score I did last time. I have a 7.5.
Industry, I still have the same 3.5 for the same reasons. Actually, in its release and the fact that there were so many people and it made so much money, I went a little higher. I went with the 3.0 for the public. So I'm at a 6.5 overall.
This is one, I agree with you that the ongoing film series does mean that this is one that people are going to keep revisiting. So I think that is a large part of the significance. So for that, I gave it a 3.5. As far as impact, one, people are still finding, I mean, even our guest had said she just watched this last year. So I'm not sure that it necessarily reached as many people as I think it should have, but that's just me. It's still one of my favorites in the last few years. So I gave it a 3.
Since when did you also become a co-host of this show? Our guest?
Okay, I was just trying to be nice.
Yes.
Sarah planting herself in an area nesting again. Unusual. Go ahead, Liz.
All right. So for this section, since we're looking at like essentially the life of the movie so far, I think that the franchise as a whole has a good potential to become one of those like cult classic followings that people later down the road will have midnight showings of, and it'll continue to be revisited. People will show their kids or grandkids, all that kind of stuff. But I think in the short term, it did do well, but I feel like it also could have done better. And so from an industry standpoint, I'm giving it a 3.5. And from a general audience, I was going to give it a 3. So 6.5.
So somehow I'm the high man this time. That's okay.
It's the edibles.
I'm sure. So that is a 6.75 average between the four of us. Novelty. This is a category on the measurement of, one, how novel the concept of the movie or maybe something surrounding the movie is, and then a 5-point total as well for the execution on said idea. Most times we're talking usually about the story, but it can relate to some other things. So again, this is a 5 and 5 category. Sarah, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. So novelty, this, like I said before, is not something that has been overly done. There's not a ton of true mystery classic films. And this is one where, to an extent, I feel like this is a little bit like some of those classic mystery novels I loved growing up, and it's fun. I'm comfortable giving this a 4.
Out of 10?
Sorry. Then I'll go with an 8 out of 10.
Leave it to my family to get the category scoring wrong, but okay. I will disagree with you, Sarah. I don't think that the mystery genre is narrow, but it's narrow in the sense that we only have certain figures that are defined from novels previously. This is one of the few areas where it's without kind of a net to support it. It's not based on Poirot or an Agatha Christie book or Sherlock Holmes for the 15 billionth time. This is creating something new. And as such, it's operating in space that's probably uncomfortable, but operates in a very well-defined space. I mean, the fact that it's able to tongue-in-cheek about most of the things that are in here, it's able to be self-referential for the genre as it's operating, and does it in a clever way without feeling reductionist, I think is a point up in favor of its execution. So as such, because it is playing by some defined rules, maybe not in the same way, I started off the show by saying this is to mystery genre what Scream was to the horror genre in the mid-90s. I do think that it's able to poke fun at it, but it doesn't in a way that feels like it's adding a chapter as opposed to trying to upend and circumvent the genre. And so as such, I have a 3.5 for the originality of the idea, but I have a 4.5 for the execution. Because from a set design perspective, from an acting perspective, from a tone perspective, I just really like the package that this all comes in. So I have an 8. Liz, let's give you next up.
Okay, so on the novelty side, I agree. You know, I think this movie borrows a lot from its ancestors, movies like Clue. We already talked about that a little bit. But at the same time, there is a lot of sneaky little things that they put in there that were different, that you weren't expecting. So I gave this one a 3.5 for the novelty. And then from an execution standpoint, I thought this was very well made. They did a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like creative things to make sure they could get the shots correct. They did long shots. They disguised cameramen so that they could get, you know, exactly the angles they wanted. And I think a lot went into this, like I said earlier. So I gave execution a 5. So I've got an 8.5.
All right, last to you there, Pop.
The originality, it's based in very traditional mystery films and the reveal, especially Agatha Christie, whether it be Ms. Marple or Poirot. So I can't give it huge marks on that portion, but I will give it a 3 simply because it redefined. It's not the true murder mystery per se. So it took some variations, so I gave it a little bit point up. But the execution was so well done that it took a fairly stale concept and made it very fresh and alive. So I went with a 4.5 for that. So I'm at a 7.5 overall.
Why, thank you for that. That's going to make my math extraordinarily easy. It's an 8 average between the four of us. All right, let's move to classicness. This is probably going to be the most difficult category of the evening, given how relatively close we are in relation to the film coming out. But Dad, we usually let you start. Take it away.
I always start at 7, as we've talked about, for various reasons and such. And the only thing I could point out as far as, I mean, I had nothing to distract from it. I had nothing to really build up on it except the whole illegal immigrant issue right now, with kind of the fear that exists among legal immigrants. So I think it does have a little bit of foreshadowing of problems that are now kind of there. So I gave it a half point up for that. So I'm at a 7.5 overall.
Liz, let's go with you.
Okay, so like I said already, I think the series as a whole has a potential to become one of those cult following series. But as far as it being a classic, I don't think this is going to be one of those movies that everyone is going to be able to agree that it's a classic. I think some people really, really like it, and I think some people just think it's okay. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 6.5.
I agree with you, Liz. This has potential to be one of those underground movies and things that parents show to their kids as they get older that, you know, it's constantly revisited. This is one I enjoy going back to, but I'm not sure I could consider it classic. And that's really hard to do because it's so recent. And just also thinking back on how things have changed in the last 4 years. So I'm going to put it at a 6.
Okay. As for me, normally we start this category at a baseline of a 7 and move up or down. Part of that has to do with the fact that usually there are things that age a movie much more often than it does make it more classic. I think given the time frame in which we're in, 5 years is not enough time to judge whether this has a certain level of timelessness or that it was ahead of its time per se, given the fact that it's really only kind of a genre to itself, unless you associate TV with a lot of maybe its influences. I just think this is kind of a contained franchise that we enjoy every time it comes up. It's fresh comparatively, but I don't think it's like reinvigorated the entire genre to itself. And I think that the political notions that were very of the moment at the time that this came out have probably already aged pretty poorly, even though we're expecting a second Trump administration now. The infighting, the backbiting, the commentary, the side swipes at everybody else, I just don't think that 4, 5, 10 years from now that's going to really age that well. And so I took a point off for that. I'm at a 6. So that is a 6.5 average between the four of us. Let's go to rewatchability. Liz, let's start with you.
Sure. So this one's hard because it is a mystery movie. So after you've seen it the first time, you kind of know what the mystery is and how it plays out. However, I do think that there's a lot of foreshadowing. There's a lot of little details they threw in there to make this a movie that people want to watch over and over again. I mean, I've watched it a few times at this point, so I'm going to give it a 7. I think that's a pretty fair score.
I'm usually at about a 6. I'll rewatch it on a regular basis. This is one that I'll pop in if I want to just, if I'm having a day where I just want to relax and not have to pay too close attention because I know the story well enough that I don't have to watch it over and over. So I'm at a 6.5. I'm not going to put this in. I'm not going to be like the other day again where I was just happened to stick in or pull up Rio Bravo because I was bored and go, yeah, okay, why not? simply because I know the ending too well and it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
This is one that I struggled with because I know that not everyone is the same frame of mind as me, where they're going to go back and rewatch something that they know the ending to. For me, however, I've rewatched it 3 times while preparing for this show because I love and look for the little things that you can learn about each time you rewatch it. And, I think this is one of them that is so complex, much like Glass Onion, that you can watch it multiple times and pick out new pieces and still have fun. And there's like just tiny moments that you may have missed the first watching or two. And so for that, I gave it a 7.
I would agree that because the ending, you kind of clearly remember who did it. It's not something that I think you can repeat view a lot, but I do think this is maybe like a every year or every other year kind of movie. And this is another one where I might not have the volition to put it on much of my own, but if I find it on somewhere, I'm probably leaving it on because it's very comfortable. There's nothing really upsetting or problematic about it. It's enjoyable. You enjoy most of the cast and the characters, and it just, you kind of fit back into this universe very easily. I think the reason that I like Glass Onion a little bit more is because the ending is a little bit more clever and it leaves more Easter eggs to kind of like see throughout the movie. And so I think I saw it in theaters on Thanksgiving 2 years ago when it came out because I was working that week. But then I went back and rewatched it like twice more, once by myself and then once with my family around Christmas when it actually came out on Netflix. And each time, like, I knew the inside joke of what actually happened. And so I was able to watch it in a much more clever fashion. Whereas this one, while you kind of know some of the things that did it, it kind of holds its cards a little bit closer to the vest instead of being magic that's like happening very close to you. And so I think there's a little bit more I like about the cleverness of doing it right out in front in Glass Onion as opposed to this one. But I think they each have their own merits. And so that's why I've been able to watch each of these probably 4 or 5 times without much issue. I, again, would strongly advocate that Rian Johnson do as many of these as he would like to until he's done. And Daniel Craig is also done. But I also have it at a 7. Or excuse me, I'm at a 7.5. So that puts us at a 7 total between the 4 of us for this category. As far as the audience score on this one, we have an 86% for Google users and a 92% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.9. So to repeat the categories, we had a 7.38 for legacy, a 6.75 for impact and significance, an 8 for novelty, a 6.5 for classicness, a 7 for rewatchability, and an audience score of 8.9, giving us a final total of 44.53, and currently placing it on our list between The Dirty Dozen and Amadeus for number 140. I was really hoping we would get this one above Fight Club just to annoy Andrew. Very close, but not quite. So,
yeah.
As usual, if you disagree with any of our scoring or have any comments for us on it, you can grade us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of our socials at gmotepodcast, or write us on our website, ronnieduncanstudios.com/gmotepodcast. All right, let's move to remaining questions, of which I have several. Why did Harlan give Marta the money?
Because his family didn't deserve it. They had every break, every opportunity to advance themselves, and they chose not to do anything on their own, but to just ride his coattails.
I think if this movie is truly a commentary on the rich, it's also a commentary on who should be given the privilege of wealth.
Yeah. I think, too, he had given so much to his family, and each of them, you find out throughout the movie, each of them had been asking for more. It was never enough for them. Whereas Marta, Like, all she wanted was to be his friend. And yes, she was paid, but she was real. And I mean, I think he loved her more than probably some of his other family members and wanted her to succeed in life and have everything that she needed and wanted.
All right. Question number 2. What happens to Marta's mom? I will turn to our legal advisor.
With $60 million, I think you can hire a really good attorney who could fight her extradition, because suddenly you can get together a bunch of affidavits that show that she is a political refugee from whatever country they actually were from, and there'd be no problem in probably getting her to stay. I'd like to say money does not have any influence in law, but I don't want to seem like an idiot.
Fair enough. Question 3. How many years in jail does Ransom get? We turn again to our legal correspondent.
Well, Massachusetts does not have the death penalty, but they do have life imprisonment. And since he attempted 2 homicides...
Correct, which usually carry with it, it's like a class D, I think what it would be the equivalent in Wisconsin.
I think he basically is going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
I think there is a notion to be said that he could be potentially tried for what's known as either depraved heart or wanton murder, or depending, I have not looked up Massachusetts law, but the fact that he could be also potentially found for felony murder in Harlan's suicide is possible. I think both of those are at least realistic. But on top of that, he's got a number of other things like arson and other charges. So if he's conservatively serving, I think it's probably 30 years without the possibility of parole. All right. Moving on. Do you prefer Knives Out or Glass Onion? I've already given my opinion on this one, but let's hear from the rest of the peanut gallery.
I think Knives Out did it better.
All right.
I think Glass Onion is also really good, but Knives Out, the original, I think just the not knowing what to expect and everything was so new about it. And I'm sure this new one that comes out is going to be good as well, but I think Knives Out is always going to be the top of the series.
For me, it's Knives Out. You have to think about where I came from, which is watching on Sunday afternoons when there wasn't football, Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes. And my dad telling me, there are actually stories about this. And then me running to the library and getting all the old Sherlock Holmes books and reading them. So this is much more of a traditional. Is Glass Onion a more intelligent and well thought out and all? Yes, but to me, the classic Knives Out is my preference. The old house, the whole thing of what it's just more of the traditional story to me that I grew up with.
Okay. How many films of these do you think they can make before you would get bored?
I'll go first. There are 53 Poirot novels. I can read them over and over and over and never get bored. There are 72 short stories and 4 full novels of Sherlock Holmes, and I never get bored. I go back and reread them all periodically about every 3 or 4 years. I can't imagine ever getting bored.
Yeah, I think as long as they continue to come up with unique storylines, people are going to keep watching the movies.
If you can continue to stack the cast, if the cleverness is still there, if the aesthetic is still right, and if Daniel Craig can still pull off the drawl, sign me up, take my money, I'm good. Okay, final question for me. Where does Benoit Blanc rank among the all-time film detectives? I think personally, we'll just start out with that I have him behind Sam Spade, Sherlock Holmes. I don't know if he'd be behind Poirot to everybody, but he probably is for me. I also have him behind Deckard from Blade Runner and probably Nicholson's character from Chinatown. But after that, there's a fairly interesting conversation to be had.
I had a hard time with it. I couldn't think of any that are more exciting. I feel like there's not a ton of like investigators and detectives in films. I can think of like TV shows.
Sure.
If you think of like House, that's kind of a detective. If you think of NCIS or Mindhunter, but movies, it's more difficult.
Monk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's one you got to go back to occasionally.
Kojak.
It's just really hard for me to have a good opinion because he's only done 2 films, and only one of those was he really the central portion of it.
He's never going to be the central figure in any of these. He's more involved in the second movie, but Rian Johnson has gone on record saying that the protagonist of his films are specifically the heroine. So Janelle Monáe in the second one, Anna de Armas in the first one. It's always told from their perspective.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to say. I mean, and then the question is what constitutes films? Is it film in general, or is it TV film? Because actually Columbo, it was done as films, but actually they were TV films. So I don't know. I just have a hard time. He's behind Perot. He's behind Sam Spade. He's behind Sherlock Holmes to me.
Well, maybe we'll just have to sick our Scooby-Doo villain out on the general public airwaves and see if he'll come back with some poll questions for us.
Fine.
Any other remaining questions?
Does she actually live in the house after all this took place? Or does she just sell it and move on?
I don't know. Since it didn't have a ton of sentimental value other than just kind of like how it was designed, I don't know if I would want to live in the house necessarily, but you would definitely spend some money to put your mother up in something nicer. With that will end us for the evening. I want to thank both of our guests. Sarah, I don't remember when you're next supposed to be back on with us. Probably have to look, but I think it's sometime next season. Yeah. So, but thank you again. I think this is your 8th episode, if my memory serves. But again, where can people find you?
People can always find me at any kind of historical conference. And I am on Instagram as @the_nomadic_archaeologist. Feel free to reach out to me.
And once again, Liz, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Absolutely. So I'll start with where you can find me. I'm on Instagram @LizInAMovie. And then I've also got a Letterboxd if that's your thing, and that's @LizByTheBay. But I do short form movie content when I go and see new movies. And then I also have long written reviews when I think it's warranted for a film. And then I have fun movie facts. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, hit me up. I'm always looking for new friends.
Excellent. And again, all of the links for our guests will be available both on the website and in the show notes for this episode. Dad, it's been fun, but we are short on time, so no remaining thoughts this week. I will just say this was another fun one to cover from 2019, but that's going to close out 2019 for the rest of the year. We are back, as I said earlier this week, or early in this episode, with Roman holiday for our Thanksgiving episode, so I have a shorter time frame, but we only have a few more things remaining for the rest of the season, and then we are coming back strong with season 6. So, with that, thank you for listening. I've never been alone with a man before, even with my dress on. With my dress off, it's most unusual. Next week for our 239th episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, and new guest, Clarissa of I've Seen That One, to revisit Roman Holiday from 1953. Directed by William Wyler, written by Dalton Trumbo, Ian McClellan Hunter, and John Dighton. Music by Georges Auric and Victor Young, starring Gregory Peck, Audrey Hepburn, and Eddie Albert. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GModePodcast or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ryan Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.